Hey friends, Jewel back again. And today we are focusing on synastry and what happens when one person's moon is square another person's Pluto. So, synastry is when you put two natal charts together or on top of each other and you can see the connections between all the different planets and points. You can see the conversations and aspects that the different planets are making to each other. And it gives you a real good view of how two people feel about each other, how they fulfill each other's needs, what goes on within their relating on a day-to-day basis. So, the moon of one person is it is the most vulnerable planet. And it's a very reflective planet. It really reflects a lot of what is pointed at. It doesn't make its own light. So the moon, is a very dependent part of ourselves. Originally is, represented by the fourth house, which is the most intimate house of all. And Cancer, which is, the feeling sign. So it's very descriptive of the way we think, the way it's our unconscious feminine. It is our habits, our habitual habits. It talks about how we nourish and care for ourselves. It's very much about feelings and emotions and about the unconscious feminine, as opposed to the sun, which is the conscious, male, masculine. What I'm saying. So when the vulnerable emotional moon meets somebody else's Pluto in synastry in a square aspect. Now squares are aspects of tension where two planets are having an argument, or they're clashing, they're trying to work something out. So what do you do when you're arguing? You're trying to work something out. So Pluto is, the powerhouse in somebody's chart. Think of the 8th house when we're talking about Pluto. It really represents how we deal with difficulty. Is the planet of crisis. Represents our unconscious self and our deepest desires, our compulsions. So it's a rougher energy to deal with, and typically, if there's violence, or roughness in somebody, that is represented by Mars and Pluto. So when you have these two meeting in a square aspect in synastry, it is a very attractive pairing. Because always, Pluto is very magnetic. Pluto, in aspect to any planet, the other planet is going to be very attracted to things of Pluto. Pluto is mysterious, dark, is very much, like when Dracula puts a spell on you and you can't resist. That is very much the feelings associated, the energy associated with Pluto. So when the most intimate and vulnerable part of one partner comes into an aspect of difficulty with somebody else's Pluto, we can see that the moon person can feel very vaguely, unconsciously disturbed by the Pluto person. The Pluto person brings up very unconscious associations, feelings, things that are very plutonic in nature to the moon person. See, both planets are very unconscious in nature. The moon is our unconscious feelings. Pluto is our unconscious buried secrets. And so when these two meet in an aspect of tension, the moon can be, kind of standoffish, because they can have these things triggered within themselves. Pluto is a big trigger for whatever planet he is contacting in synastry or in the natal chart as well. So the Pluto person can have a real morbid fascination. The moon person, the moon person can have a real morbid fascination with the Pluto person. And even though there is this, feeling that there might be something wrong, they are still very attracted and drawn to the Pluto person. So things that the moon can't control, feelings, habits, unconscious impulses that the moon can normally control are kind of set loose with this particular square to Pluto. They can behave in ways that they have never behaved with anybody else before, because it's very much like the Pluto person very much almost puts a knife in the moon person and slits them open, and all of the garbage just comes pouring out of the moon person. And because Pluto is a trigger, so the difficulties of the moon, and you would want to look to the sign, particularly that the moon is in the house, is going to give you a lot of information as well. The difficulties associated with that particular sign are going to, be what is triggered mostly by the moon, by the Pluto person. You would also want to see how the other person's moon is aspected, because that's going to give you a wealth of information. In astrology, you always look to aspects first, then you look to the house that it's in, then you look to the sign. And I'll make a particular video on that. People think it's all about the sign. No, the sign is actually the last thing that you consider. The aspect is the conversation. That is where it's at. The house is just where the conversation is occurring. And then the sign describes the kind of clothes that the planets that are having the conversation are wearing. So it's really about aspects first. So see how somebody's Pluto and moon are aspected to really see how they are going to ultimately play out with this. So it is very common with this aspect for the moon person to, over time, give up portions of their control to the Pluto person. And the Pluto person will very gladly take it, because there is a real sense at the beginning of the relationship that the moon person is easy to manipulate and control, even if this is not a conscious thing. The Pluto person is probably not sitting around going, well, I'm dating Nancy now, and I think that I may be able to one-up on her and get her to do this, this, and that, and the other thing. Pluto doesn't work like that. Pluto is a very unconscious force and bubbles up from the back of our mind. It tends to control us from behind. So it's a very subtle energy. It's a very potentially manipulative placement where this kind of thing really creeps into the relationship over time. Even though there is a sense from the moon person in the beginning that something might be off, the actual damage that can come from this particular square creeps in a little bit over time. So neither will see or acknowledge with the square what is going on, because it is such an unconscious thing, and they won't take responsibility for it with the square. It's something that they really have to do some learning about before they can see what is going on. So it is a placement that we can see in the charts, the Synastry charts of partners that are into sadism or masochism. The moon person ends up often in a very masochistic position, and it's this can be a connection that can be actually damaging between partners. So you have to really consider the natal placements when you see this square and the signs, and how somebody's moon and Pluto are aspected, because if somebody is prone to being a sadistic person or is prone to taking control, if somebody has unresolved, deeply Plutonic issues and they get with a moon person in this square, and you see the moon person has some codependency issues, some issues with abandonment, has their own moon issues, or their own Plutonic issues as well, because, if their moon relates to Pluto, we could see somebody who's, got that going on. If those two types of people meet up with the square, and often this square is what that is about, this is what that is showing, these two types of personalities have connected. If we see that two people who are prone to those behaviors meet up, then we can see some damage being done with this particular connection, because of what squares mean and because of what Pluto and the moon represent. So it's one that you have to pay attention to. Now, if you have healthy connections otherwise, and you have two people that are more prone to taking responsibility, now, number one, they're probably not going to have this aspect between them, but you can see it. It can show up sometimes. You're going to see less drama associated with this, and two people that are able to handle this in a lot better ways than two other people that actually end up in the therapist's office. So it's one that you have to pay attention to when you see it in Synastry, because it can mean that there is some great challenges between these two people if they want to have a relationship that is not about manipulation or control. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be back super soon with more super cool videos. You can find me on the internet at truthandaspectastrology.com. Yes, I do private consultation all the time. I specialize in relationship and intimacy astrology, but I interpret all types of relationships. I'm sorry. Natal charts. I'm just used to saying relationship 75 times a day, or 75,000 times a day. And you can find me on Facebook as well at Truth in Aspect Astrology, where I do the daily weather forecast, astrology weather forecast, birthday descriptions, all kinds of articles, all super cool stuff over there. So follow me over on Facebook, and I'll be back really soon. Bye-bye.